Just lots of fun stuff, so it's really a lot.
Good morning. I'd like to call the Village Board Budget Workshop meeting for the Village of Cary for Saturday, January 18th, 2020 to order with roll call, please.
Weinhammer.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
Cavelli. Here. Collier.
Here.
Betts. Here.
Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll now open forum where the public is invited to make an issue-oriented comment on any matter of public concern not otherwise on the agenda. Does anybody have anything they want to say? Cassie? Nothing? Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and close open forum at 9:02. Before we get started on this, I am beyond proud of our Public Works Department. We've been awarded 2 separate awards from the American Public Works Association's the Fox Valley Branch Public Works Project of the Year Award. One for the Cary Metro Station. So we are proud recipients of that. That's awesome. Congratulations to Eric and his team for that. And also another one, which is outstanding, and we continuously get awards for our wastewater treatment plant. And again, we were awarded the Public Works Project of the Year Award for the wastewater treatment plant Phase 1 improvements from the American Public Works Association Fox Valley Branch. So John, thank you for all you do for that, as well as Eric and Steve. I know that you're here too. So we greatly appreciate everything you do for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and all the staff too. It was a team effort, obviously. Ironically, these awards were issued here this week. So these are capital projects that we have discussed in previous years. They were just completed here this year, and Eric had spent a lot of time with the team to submit an application, made a presentation too before the APWA about the projects as well, and we're happy for Eric and the whole department.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like Jake said, it was a team effort. Our wastewater project in particular, all of our wastewater operators have been playing a key role in keeping that project and refining the operations of that project. It's biological phosphorus removal is new to us, a new system to us, but it is functioning, I think, even better than expected. Operators like Matt Anderson, Keel Shadle, and Mike McManus, all 3 of them have been doing a great job fine-tuning that operation and keeping it going. So it's a award here at the beginning and for the construction, but the real award goes to the team to keep it going from here on out.
Yeah.
So thank you. Well, on to the business at hand, a discussion of the fiscal year 2021 20 to 25 capital improvement plan program.
See, and too, the bar is set high. So we have 2 awards this year. So next year, we're expecting 3, Eric. So we have to find 3 projects in here to get awards somehow.
Well, we do have
So
a new village hall that's coming up
That's
too.
right.
So that's good.
I think my performance
Please
review
do.
partly.
That'll get us 1.
So
Well-
Chief, what have you done for us lately?
A lot of good stuff. Mayor Village Board, this is our 5-year capital improvement program. We're excited to present this to you. A lot of work went into this, Eric and Courtney. There's a lot of great projects in here that we're looking for your feedback on here today. So, our agenda today, we want to review the budget schedule for this year, talk about why we do our CIP meeting with you, review various projects and departments, and then at the end, we're going to review our expenditures and compare those to the available revenue that we have. So our budget process and our budget schedule for this year, as you know, today we have our first budget workshop meeting, January 18th. That's where we review our capital improvement program. Our second budget workshop meeting, which the board is familiar with, the main focus of that is our general fund. We do touch on various enterprise funds and some special projects within that meeting too. We anticipate the final budget approval will be on April 7th. So the purpose of today for our capital improvement program, we want to inform the village board about projects. We want to be able to answer questions, but we also want to get your feedback. We want to get your feedback of what you have today. I encourage board members to follow up with me after the meeting, ask questions, meet with the mayor, discuss various projects, funding sources. We want to continue this dialogue, not just have it end today. A lot of discussion will be this morning on our commuter parking lot, and then also the downtown. No final decisions made today. This is purely for discussion and feedback. So what is the CIP? This is a 5-year plan of our current and future capital needs. In some cases, we do go out beyond 5 years. There are instances where we've gone out beyond 5 years, and that is more internal discussions that we have with staff. These are purely estimates. What we have provided before you are estimates, so the costs and even the revenues, they are estimated within this presentation. At the end, we'll compare the costs so you have an ability to see the overall costs, look at the revenues. We're able to make informed decisions collectively. Annually, changes are made to the CIP just based on the priorities from the village board and what staff thinks is important. So what you've seen previously in last year's or even a couple years ago from projects, those have may been moved up or have may been pushed back as well. So why do we complete a capital plan? I think a lot of the board has probably seen these previously, and I'm not going to go through every one, but just touch on a few. Most importantly is this is the largest expenditure of our annual budget. So we need to have conversations about this each year. We need to look beyond just 1 year. We need to look at this 5 years so we're able to make informed decisions. This is a planning tool for us. We want to make sure that both from the village board and staff are on the same page about what are the priorities, what are the important projects for our community and our residents. And then finally, why I like this, and I think why a lot of board members might like to review the CIP, is we do this to try to avoid surprise emergency expenditures. It's not fun for me when we have surprises, and obviously too with the village board. I'm sure that that's not ideal for you as well. We always want to get feedback from our residents. This year we did something new. We sent out a survey here for capital improvement for our program. It had various options and selections for our residents to provide us with feedback. We got 142 responses as of January 16th, which is pretty good. I'd like it to be 18,000. We're not going to get that, unfortunately. But we did get good feedback, and what we heard here was a mix from residents. You see as what is most important for the residents that responded to the survey, roads, but then also our water and sewer infrastructure. We got verbal comments too about projects. I sent that out to the board probably a week and a half or a week ago, give or take. Hope you had an opportunity to review that. It was great feedback. It really was good feedback from our residents of what they think that we should be focusing on from a capital improvement program. So now getting into departments and various projects, starting with administration and community development. We may not go through every project within the slides that we have here. For this slide in particular, I just want to focus on a couple. IT and GIS infrastructure, that is an annual expense. As we continue to try to become more efficient here, we've rightfully so allocated dollars for IT and GIS. The RTA project that we have, that was a grant that the village received for a downtown study. That is a 20% local match. Building permit imaging. So we have building permit files that are hard documents that we're trying to reduce the amount of square footage that we have with all these files, but also make those available at the fingertips of our employees, or instead of having to go back to the file room, they can just access all of this electronically. That we see that as being just trying to take small bites out of the apple each year and improve our document storage. And then finally, we're looking and considering discussing internally here with staff about a little website refresh, but this would also make it compatible with mobile devices. Right now, if you go on our website with mobile devices, it's a little clunky. This would improve that, and I think would be a good customer service option for our customers. Are there any questions that the board had related to any of these projects that are listed here? Okay. Now moving on to fleet and equipment, and Eric's going to go over this in more detail. As you know, we've been looking at enterprise fleet management. We had them before the committee of the whole at a previous meeting. We think that's a great option for the village to explore, and that's on the agenda for for Tuesday right now. And Eric's going to go over that. I think we have some good detail in here to provide more information to the village board about why we feel this is a good program for our community.
Thank you. As Jake mentioned, this will be before continuing that discussion and before the village board Tuesday for consideration. As we mentioned at that committee discussion about a week or two ago, the fleet management strategies are, there's a few options out there for us. And obviously the current process that we operate under right now is the cash purchasing, and we typically do that through joint contracts, whether it be through the state of Illinois, Northwest Municipal Conference, or just joint bidding in general. And while it does give us really good pricing, it does obviously have a impact on our bottom line given the number of vehicles that we have to maintain, and especially with the larger heavy-duty vehicles, the equipment themselves can cost an upwards of $200,000 each. So given the constraints that places on us from a cash flow perspective, there are other options that we've looked at. And as we mentioned at the committee discussion, traditional financing, we could spread out that money over multiple years while still owning and maintaining those vehicles and keeping them for a considerable time, because we tend to operate under that drive it till it dies approach. So a vehicle that we invest in will stay with us for upwards of 10 to 15 or more years. So the option that we've proposed with the open-ended leasing option through Enterprise Fleet Management is a kind of a unique option, and it's something that's been tried by some other area agencies and some of our local neighbors as well. Right now, currently, just in this immediate area, the city of Crystal Lake and the village of Algonquin have been in this program for a couple of years now. Mm-hmm. So the benefits of the open-ended lease, which is slightly different than what a customer like you or I would go to if we were to go to a car dealer and try to lease a vehicle, those are what are called closed-end leases. So some of the benefits and differences with these open-ended leases are, one, the obvious cash flow perspective. Smaller payments per year as opposed to the immediate upfront cost for all the vehicles. We do have lower maintenance and enhanced productivity because these leases will be on some of the lighter duty vehicles will be on a short term. So the vehicles will be turned around in 12 months when the optimum point of return for the value on those vehicles is highest. What that also does is it keeps the vehicle in bumper warranty coverage throughout the use by the village. And it also eliminates the need for even some of the scheduled maintenance. In a 12-month period with some of the modern synthetic oils and so forth, there's no tire changes, no brake changes, and no oil changes even for a lot of these vehicles. I mentioned the bumper-to-bumper warranty coverage, and even on some of the medium-duty trucks that you could lease in this program, our one-ton trucks with the dump bodies, those would be proposed on a 5-year basis, and in that 5 years, those vehicles come with a managed maintenance plan through Enterprise Fleet Management. So all the maintenance scheduled for those vehicles is also included. So that's where the productivity and the staff end comes in. We operate currently with only a single mechanic whose duties are prioritized based on needs, which primarily are with our police fleet, which, no offense to the chief, that is our most important need, but that tends to put the equipment in the Public Works Department and Community Development Department as the secondary and the secondary need. So a lot of those things that are pushed off or are never done will actually get some attention, which would be good for our fleet on the other equipment as well. And obviously we're doing an optimum vehicle replacement schedule, and then we're also going through a process that's been vetted and utilized by agencies that we know and trust, and also by purchasing and selecting Enterprise Fleet Management. It is through a joint contract. So it's Sourcewell's cooperative purchasing program. So it is something that also is ideally giving the best pricing for us as well. I'll go just quickly through these. This is the kind of the bottom line numbers on the leasing versus the purchasing comparison for the police patrol vehicles. So the bottom line, and kind of one of the most important factors in the cash flow side, is that instead of spending an upwards of $42,000 per patrol vehicle, and we typically have been purchasing 2 to 3 of those per year to keep our fleet going and keeping them in that good operating range, we'll only be spending less than $11,000 per year. In the upfront cost, that's a considerable savings. And then on the flip side, as far as the turnaround on those vehicles, we're only keeping them in the fleet for 4 years, whereas typically we keep them now for 8 to 12 years. Now, granted, in patrol duty, they get out of that role in that first 3 to 4 years, but it's the secondary use where they get turned into hand-me-down vehicles to administration, community development, and public works. So it's those last 5 years that we spend a lot of time in maintenance on those vehicles as they get older. And they do come to us heavily used, obviously, in that police patrol use. So on the admin side, this is kind of where the biggest bang for the buck comes into play for the lease program. While it seems like a bigger vehicle that we may expect to need for our administrative use, right now the half-ton crew cab pickup trucks have the highest resale value in terms of the market. And that's not just a new phenomenon, that's been what we've seen in the U.S. market for decades. I think the best-selling vehicle in America for probably the last several decades has always been a pickup truck of that configuration. So what we're proposing with that is that all the light-duty vehicles that would have been hand-me-down police cars are leased through this model. So this is where it's a 12-month program. The cars don't go through any maintenance scheduled on our end. And then because of our joint purchasing power, the purchase price that we get the vehicles on the front end is actually equal to or less than what they're worth after the 12-month. So that equity that we realize through turning these vehicles on a relatively quick pace actually gets applied to our bottom line and reduces our annual payments for that vehicle down the road. So that's where this is almost a cost neutral, or you don't want to bank on the equity and the profit, but there's that potential for it. So it does give us that definite cost savings. And same thing for the medium duty vehicles. These are on a 5-year basis. These are typically $60,000 to $70,000 for the cab chassis, and then depending on what kind of body's on the back of it, whether it's a dump body or a flatbed or utility body, over $35,000 in savings for that first year. So right now we're already reducing that annual cost and spreading out the life of that vehicle equipment fund balance. And then the heavy-duty trucks, the same thing. This is one where it's not so much a bottom-line savings over the life of the vehicle, but these are big trucks that we tend to keep for a very long time. But when you get to that 9 to 10-year range and up, that's when the maintenance comes into play, and a lot of repairs and downtime for unscheduled issues that may occur on those trucks. So in this model, we would spread out the cost, not have to throw down $180,000 to $200,000 at one time. But we also end up recycling the fleet before they hit that period where they're higher maintenance and higher costs. So they're refreshed between 9 and 10 years instead of 15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And this is our tentative 5-year model for our fleet replacement schedule. So we're not looking to implement every vehicle in the leasing program at one time. So it'll be kind of as the needs dictate that, and obviously as our resources dictate. So for the first year, we're proposing to implement 12 vehicles in the lease program. Most of these vehicles are vehicles of significant age, and a lot of them are, you recall back in the 80s and 90s, the Crown Victoria was the police car of choice. We haven't seen those in our police active duty patrol fleet in quite some time, but these dinosaurs are still around and have been utilized in our admin fleet. So we're getting rid of, I believe, 4 of those that we had left, the 3 for sure. So that's obviously a good step in the right direction.
Thank goodness.
I've had a couple of those vehicles. We go out on a little field trip just in town, and we don't make it back. We have to have it towed back. So,
Yeah.
it was Jake. You know.
Been there,
It's
done
time,
that.
like, get rid of this car.
Yes, so it's, like I said, the reliability in the fleet will be a very positive impact on the operation.
Yeah, that's important to note, because we do want employees to have good equipment to do their jobs. That's very important to me. And we have resources and budgets that we have to stay within, but we want to make sure they have the equipment and tools to do their job and do a job right.
And you can see, just as an example with the first column there, for this next proposed fiscal year, the proposed lease payments would be about $100,000, but with about $53,000 coming back in equity from the trade-in value of the vehicles. So a net of about, just for argument's sake, about $50,000. If we were to replace those 12 vehicles with our old model, purchase them in cash up front, that would have been over $400,000. So this is where the cash flow flexibility is really beneficial. And I don't know if Mike wants to add anything to that in the finance end, but that's just kind of a good example of some of the positives we see with the program.
Were there any, before we go on to the next slide, were there any questions from the village board about this cash flow or?
Why is fiscal year 21, 22 more expensive? It looks like there's less vehicles that are being used. You know, fiscal year 2021 looks like there's more.
A lot of it has to do with the value of the vehicle. Some of the heavy, each vehicle, and we're kind of listing them as one unit down the road, but they're not identical. Some of them will be equipped differently. The police vehicles are equipped a little bit differently. And then you also have the equity that comes back into play. So it's hard to estimate and show on the slides, but so year to year, as we release especially those half-ton crew cab pickup trucks, you still have the additional cost, but then you have the equity kind of rolled back into it.
So you're still paying the lease is what you're saying. You're still paying the lease on year 2. So that's why the cost is
Right.
more. Mhm.
We didn't buy vehicles this year.
Right.
Either, so we're kind of
Catching up.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I think it's smart. I like the phased approach, obviously.
I got a question. Is Enterprise the only company out there? Is that all we looked at?
There are a few of them, but we selected Enterprise because it was already jointly bid through Sourcewell.
Okay.
So it has been compared in terms of pricing with the other options, but also because of the fact that we've been able to, like through a lot of our coordination through our municipal partnering and our different brainstorming that we do with our neighboring agencies, we've been able to get that firsthand and personal discussions with the other towns that have been doing this.
Yeah, Crystal Lake has been doing this for a couple years. Algonquin recently went to it, and in conversations we've had with those folks, it's been a positive experience. Good questions. Anything else? Okay, moving on to the police department here. A few items that we have in here. Chief, if you come up here and apprise the board of these items. We have our consolidated training facility that we've talked about previously. The chief and he'll describe that more of where we're at right now. He's working through various options with the sheriff and other chiefs within the county, and then the Starcom radios that we have planned. Those are the items, excuse me, those are the items that we have planned for next fiscal year.
In regards to the consolidated training facility, again, this is an initiative that involves several different police departments in the sheriff's office. It'll be Algonquin, Crystal Lake, Lake in the Hills, Huntley, McHenry, ourselves, Cary, and the sheriff's office, and McHenry County Community College. So what we were looking at initially was to purchase a purpose-built building for firearms training and some training classrooms. And then while we were doing that research and looking for a building and trying to determine cost for that, a second initiative was kind of presented itself. So we've been talking to an individual in regards to retrofitting a current industrial building in Woodstock. The difference between the two are, number one, that the agreement in Woodstock would entail a long-term agreement, like 30 or 40 years, and it would require fiscal support constantly. There is no big outlay in regards to a purchase of a building or something like that. The purpose-built building would be initial cost for the facility, and then there will be ongoing maintenance in regards to that building. So we have a meeting scheduled for Friday to discuss both those options and kind of determine which direction we're going to go. But we're on the path of purchasing in conjunction with the other agencies, and the sheriff providing a significant amount of money to make that happen, to kind of investigating the secondary opportunity that presented itself. So we're in the middle of that, but this $125,000 is still the same $125,000 that we were looking at in regards to the purchase of a building in our estimation related to the cost of that procurement. That would be our share of it, because it would be based on number of users for that facility. So that would be the training facility. Not one, and I would also say that our plans aren't to put a firearms range in our new facility, the Village Hall or Police Department. They're expensive endeavors. They have some issues related to potential environmental impact. There's some potential hazardous materials that in the long run we may have to deal with if we put it in a building. So it's probably best to have it in a separate standalone facility that's shared, because it's a shared resource that everyone has to use, and there's a variety of different options that people use throughout the county. Number one. The second thing is that Lafarge Meyer Material had informed us that we cannot use their quarry any longer for our outdoor training. So we're going to have to investigate a different option in regards to training in the upcoming year. So that's another option, and they had suggested maybe talking to Algonquin Police Department, and we're researching other potential facilities that we can use. So in essence, this is an initiative that is necessary, and with some of the correspondence that I've been receiving from both NEMRT and the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board related to funding, and on a go-forward basis, at least temporarily, it looks like there was a public act that was enacted. It was Public Act 10987, the Criminal and Traffic Assessment Act. And what that did is gave judges the ability not to assess fines for traffic and criminal issues. So currently, in the message from the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board, they have not received, or they have a reduced amount that they've received of $4.4 million. Because of that was a revenue source that would fund police training in the state of Illinois. So there's more to come in regards to that. Any questions in regards to the consolidated training facility?
So it's still a fluid situation, and we hope to have more information, as the chief said. We'll have our next budget meeting on March 14th, and we hope to have a little bit more direction about where we're going to be heading at that time to have another discussion with the village board about it.
The second, so that was kind of bad news, right? The better news is the second thing here is the Starcom mobile radios. We're dispatched by CCOM. There was a decision made that we would encrypt all of our radio traffic. So some of the mobile radios that were installed in our vehicles cannot support that encryption. So we have to buy new mobile radios so that we can talk on the talk groups that we're using for our dispatch. These are relatively expensive radios. They range between $3,000 and $4,000 for the mobiles, and especially with the capability for that encryption. But what has evolved here is a program through the Emergency Telephone Systems Board. And the desire on a county level is to get everyone on the same communications platform. It'll improve efficiencies through interoperability, and in the long run, it gives you a little bit more flexibility in regards to the ability to look at different dispatch centers if you so desire, because everyone's not using the same equipment. So in order to get both fire and police disciplines to migrate to the Starcom radio platform, the Emergency Telephone System Board has enacted a program, or approved a program just Thursday, to reimburse municipalities for the costs that were incurred for the migration to and the use of the Starcom radio platform. Currently, this year, it'll be $350,000 that will be set aside for that. and it'll be based on a proportional formula related to the number of full-time sworn personnel that you have if you're using that Starcom radio equipment for your dispatch, and we do. So we qualify, and there's a 36-month clawback for this. But again, it's proportional, so we only get a proportion. We have, in this instance, 27 full-time sworn personnel, or full-time personnel, one of which is not sworn but qualifies as a first responder. So we would use that 27 number against the number of, full-time personnel that are submitted through this agency, through the agencies, on a proportion of that $350,000. I submitted $107,613.89 because in 2017, we had almost $98,000 in expenditures because we bought our portable radios then. And then we had expenditures of $3,000 in 2018 because we had free airtime for the use of the Starcom radios. And in 2019, we lost that, or that free airtime ran out, so we started paying our full share in regards to the subscription cost for each portable radio and mobile radio, and that was $6,750. Because we can go back 36 years, we will be able to get the full amount of that reimbursement. So that's probably in the area of about $20,000 that we'll be able to recoup. It makes sense to purchase these, this equipment because we can submit that for reimbursement and get partial reimbursement as well. Any questions in regards to that?
I'd like to hear the word reimbursement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a good program. I believe that, DTSB wants to have, number one, the ability to put everyone on the same communications platform, but number two is a condition of taking this money. We have the ability to have everyone talk or participate in a interoperable communications committee so that we can standardize procedures as well.
Very good. Thank you, Chief. So now moving along to our facilities maintenance and improvements. So our new building, the new police station and village hall planning here, we have secured the architect. Right now we are working to secure a construction manager. We have interviews next week. We've shortlisted 3 firms after a RFP, RFQ process. So we will be completing those interviews and expect that recommendation to be before the village board on February 4th. And construction, again, these are estimates right now. $9 million is what we are anticipating for the construction. So is there any questions that the board has about the new building?
Well, we'll get into more detail once, we're not getting into the detail of just saying we're earmarking where we're at with it.
Correct.
It's fine.
So our existing building, and Eric can talk about more here, some of the costs that we have received from the reserve study that we completed about a year ago. Next year, what we have planned, next fiscal year, I should say, is $25,000 for maintenance. We want to make sure that we continue to spend dollars to maintain the building. There's some larger capital items that we've included in here, such as the great room structural repairs that I think everyone is aware of, the roof, siding, and the parking lot. So is there any questions that the village board had that Eric could answer from a facilities standpoint? Okay, and moving on to our facilities, the senior center, maintenance items that were identified through our reserve study that we completed for all our buildings within the village, and then also Public Works. Public Works is a newer building. I wouldn't say it's new. There's obviously costs that we've incurred this fiscal year, and there will be future costs to make sure that we maintain that building. Are there any questions that the board has related to these 2 buildings? Okay, moving on. Now we're going to go through and talk about the commuter parking lot and also get into the downtown. Eric's going to go through some projects that we have here. We keep in mind, as you hear us go through the projects, we're not going to be able to fund everything through the parking fund. we have some projects that we're going to have to pay for, such as the closeout for the new Metra building. We do owe cost to Metra related to that. And then also, there's a pedestrian crossing that, as a part of this new building, we were required to put in and pay for, well, required to pay for. I believe Union Pacific is doing the actual work. But that is a cost that we will have to plan for and pay for this next fiscal year. There are some other items, you can see here, the parking lot, that need maintenance. We don't have the funding right now in the parking fund to pay for that. There are options for the village board to consider. So as Eric goes through these projects, I just want you to keep that in the back of your mind of what are your priorities with the parking fund.
All right, so the first project that was looked at in terms of the commuter parking area is probably the most visible project, the old depot building. So now the new facility is up and operational. There is the desire and the need to work with the Union Pacific and demolish the old facility. So what you'll see on the screen there, the light gray footprint is the outline of where the existing building currently sits. So the dark gray sidewalks are the existing concrete that's out there. That's already a raised sidewalk around the building. So what we're proposing is a demolition and interim site restoration. So what I mean by interim will be that until a more substantial or permanent streetscape design and construction is able to be implemented there, we would just restore the area with concrete so that it could still be utilized as a whole as a pseudo civic area for pedestrian and event use. So it can be done in two ways. The number that we're proposing in the CIP is more of the all-encompassing area where we fill in the existing building with concrete. And then we also convert the 90-degree kiss and ride parking stalls, which have some logistical traffic operations challenges and safety concerns in themselves. We would propose taking out those spaces, raising it up with concrete to the same level as the rest of the area, and then turning the kiss and ride parking spaces into a kiss and ride lane, as generally depicted on the picture. Any questions with that? Yeah. And then obviously before we're able to demolish that existing building, it's not just a depot, it also contains a maintenance garage that the railroad houses some of their equipment and supplies in. So as a condition of demolishing that building, the railroad will require us to build them a replacement garage. Luckily, it's not a very substantial facility that they would need. It actually could be accommodated in a 14 by 20 foot, almost like a residential style detached garage building. So it could be a almost prefabricated unit that's available commercially that will work with the railroad to implement down towards the remote lot in the area that the railroad currently owns between the two parking lots. Another project that we are suggesting for a 5-year CIP is a little safety and fencing project. So on the south commuter lot right by West Main Street, the south lot is currently right parallel to the railroad tracks. And there's a tendency for the commuters to leave their vehicles and walk parallel to the tracks over to the platform, which does lend itself to some visibility challenges for those pedestrians because of the trains that could be coming, especially from the outbound track, are coming from over your shoulder and behind you. So what we're suggesting is about 200 feet of black aluminum fencing, kind of matching what is also present downtown, to divert those pedestrians away from the track, at least to this point. Hopefully encourage them to maybe use the crosswalk that's there, but at a minimum, get them so that they're coming at more of a 90-degree angle to the tracks so that the visibility to the oncoming trains is in the peripheral vision instead of behind them. We're envisioning this project just based on the fact with the fencing contractor as a standalone project, there'll be some pricing and procurement challenges. Most of those types of companies don't like prevailing wage work. And there's also the railroad flagging and railroad insurance that's involved. So that will actually lend itself to be more cost effective as an in-house project that Steve and his crews could do themselves. Jake mentioned the other project. The requirement of the depot that's now open is the pedestrian crossing signals and diversion fencing at the west platform crossing. So that's work that the railroad would self-perform, and we would just reimburse them for those costs. So we're anticipating that work to begin sometime this spring or summer in conjunction with the other half of the inbound platform that has to be removed and replaced, similar to what was done over in front of the depot this past fall. And resurfacing. Those first images we showed just examples of the pavement conditions that are currently out there. And there is definitely a strong need, particularly in the south commuter lots, for that resurfacing work to occur. So what we're proposing is to look at hopefully some economies of scale, give us some flexibility and options once we come to the next budget workshop. There's a bid out on the street currently that will be open with results this coming Thursday. So we'll have a better idea of what the pricing is. We've bid it in a manner that allowed us to get it out early. And given the really early timings, will be one of the first resurfacing program bids on a municipal level that's out there, according to our consultant. So we're hoping to see some favorable results. But their current estimates are shown there below, about $200,000 to resurface the south lots. So that'd be the area south of Main Street. And then about a little over $400,000 for the resurfacing of the north lots. Then obviously some construction engineering and a lot of coordination involved with those resurfacings, given that we can't just close all the lots at one time and resurface them. There'll be some phased work and even potentially some overnight or weekend work involved and some premium time, just because of the configuration of our lots and the need to keep a good percentage of those spots open at all times. So here's a summary of all the different projects that I just mentioned, potentially for this coming fiscal year. Some may have to get deferred to a later fiscal year, depending on the funding source chosen. If we end up not using a commuter parking fund dollars or loans from the general fund, we would have to look into using motor fuel tax money for some of this resurfacing of the parking lots. That would require some additional Illinois DOT review and approvals in order to use those MFT funds. So that would push that work at the earliest into the next fiscal year, which would be 2021-22.
We believe we have the ability to pay for the new Metra depot, make that payment to Metra, and then also the pedestrian work, make that payment to the Union Pacific Railroad out of the parking fund. But as Eric had mentioned, and you'll see here, there's the depot landscaping, there is the maintenance garage, there's a demo of the existing building that I'm not sure where those are on the priority list from the village board. We have options for you to pay for those. One that we're exploring here is a potential loan from the general fund to the parking fund that the parking fund then pays back. I think that would be paid back over 3 or 4 years, plus or minus. But also sitting out there, as Director Morimoto had stated, was the commuter parking lots and the resurfacing of those lots. There's different options that we could look at for that. We could use MFT dollars. Keep in mind, using MFT dollars, there's a review that has to take place for that. Plus, using MFT dollars for those parking lots, then that impacts the amount of MFT dollars that we have for the residential roads out there. So there's options. We want to provide you with options to consider. And like I mentioned earlier, I encourage board members to come in and talk with the mayor, come in and see me and talk with myself and Eric and Michael, and we can go over these items in more detail.
I have a question.
Sure.
The estimated annual revenue on the bottom, does that include the new parking fees, or is that not?
This includes the new fees. I just noticed a typo there. Ignore that number, actually.
Yeah, that's
the MFT number. The revenue numbers are approximately $290,000 per year. So it's an increase of about $60,000 per year that we're anticipating and projecting with the new fees. So as you can see, $290,000 per year is definitely a fraction of the $1.6 million of projects that have needs this coming fiscal year. So we're definitely gonna need your assistance in prioritizing this column here of $1.6 million to fit into that $300,000 or so revenue we have in the parking fund, and then figure out where the balance goes from there.
Once they're resurfaced, new resurfacing, what's the life expectancy now compared to before? So once it's resurfaced, how long do we have with these lots in general?
In general, luckily, we have some pretty good gravelly, granular soils and sandy soils. So our parking lots, I would say, last a lot longer than our neighbors to the east in Lake County. I would hope to see 10 to 15 years out of these parking lot pavements. It'll require some maintenance in terms of crack filling and any other pavement preservation techniques that if we have funding to apply towards that, we'll extend the life of that. But honestly, the condition you see now in our parking lots, it's gone a little longer than we ideally would like to see. A lot of that was because of the fact that we wanted to accommodate the metro station project and other needs as well in the parking areas. Those parking lots haven't been paved in upwards of 15 years. Hence the condition that they have.
South lot,
Yeah,
15 years.
the south lot is the one that we're concerned about. The north lot, I think we could probably get a few more years out of the north lot. The
With
south lot,
patching and stuff,
yeah, is stressed.
So is that 600,000 then for the entire, for all the lots?
That's all the lots, right?
So-
400,000 for the north, 200,000
How
for the
much was the
south.
south again?
200.
200?
200.
So it's possible to phase out some of the lots, just because I'm looking at the 21, 22 year, and there's not that many expenditures expected as of now. If we were to phase out some of that 600,000 and defer it to 21, 22, how that would look.
Yeah, I believe the staff's recommendation will be to do just the south lot right now, and then we
Okay.
can postpone the north lot because it's not as bad.
And just for clarification, the 1.6 for total expenditures, we're, in a sense, we can take off 700,000 for the new metro lot and the pedestrian. That's already allocated, right? And we already got the money for that already set aside. So it's not an additional 1.6 that's included in the funds that's already in the parking fund.
The 1.6 is the total expenditures.
Right, but I'm saying we've already allocated in our parking fund when we did this for the Metra and for the pedestrian crossing. Right? When we went into this project,
Michael,
we had money already set aside for that, did we not?
It's more fund balance than set aside.
Right, fund balance. I mean, we have the fund balance for that already to cover that.
Currently, I think when we were talking about the pedestrian crossing that is out there, there currently isn't fund balance to handle the pedestrian
I
crossing.
thought there was. Okay.
No, there is not.
Okay.
That project came up at the end after we had already gone through the new station and the other improvements we needed to make.
Okay.
So currently, I mean, what we're dealing with here is just a little bit of a cash flow issue and figuring out how we're going to pay for some of these improvements in the interim until we have our funding back.
but with the revenue for next year, I think we had planned that the ped crossing is able to be funded with the revenue next year.
Correct.
So all in, we can cover those costs for the Metro Depot payment and the pedestrian crossing with the revenue next year. But these other projects, though, the demolition of the building, the garage, the parking lots, those are the ones that we don't have the ability to fund.
Correct.
You may recall in previous CIPs, we had been targeting and hoping that the commuter parking lots would have not required resurfacing until 2022 or so. But obviously the conditions, they're not linear. There's a lot of variables involved, but they've definitely deteriorated a little more quickly as of late.
Right.
Hence the why we do CIP reviews annually, and we're recommending moving that upward and then having to discuss how we accommodate the cash flow.
So again, some of those that are, we're looking at potentially taking loans from the general fund, those can be pushed to 21, 22, because if you don't demo the depot site, then the garage stays there. So those two items are kind of connected, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, right?
Yep, we could push those, yep. Could move them back.
What about the the payment of the 420? Can it be spaced or is there a penalty if you do that?
I don't think we have the ability
No,
to.
our IG requires payments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a good idea, yeah.
We'll go on a payment plan with them.
Yeah.
And the same as the pedestrian crossing. It was a condition of the railroad for getting our easements for the new building.
Yeah.
They've already been very flexible with us and not requiring that it be done before we open the facility, because that was originally the plan. So given that, we definitely do see the Metro Depot contribution and the ped crossing as two of the more imminent and that we really have to do. And everything else there is needs to be done. It's just a matter of balancing where we fund them from.
We have the ability to scale some of these items too. The landscaping, you see the depot landscaping, so that's our new building. I mean, there's no landscaping around it. It looks kind of naked. We have the ability to, tighten the belt on that. If the board wanted to do some landscaping or just move it, we could just move it to a future year. The demo too, I think the demo of the existing building, depending on the finishing there and how the site is finished, I think there's some ability, correct, that we could reduce that cost of $100,000 potentially. So it just really depends of what the priorities of the village board are on this. Seeing that building go away, the landscaping, the paving of the lots. So there's options for you to consider. We want to provide you options.
Like, for example, with this paving all this area, kind of outlined in the yellow lines, that's what I envisioned the 100,000 being. We could do just this part here, or just these two pieces. You get that patchwork look, so it won't be the cleanest new look, but it would be functional. So again, it's kind of balancing the aesthetics versus the function versus the finances. There's
Well, and
a lot of choices to make here.
So, and I think I'd rather move that project and then, go with something more aesthetically appeasing. If it means we have it for another year, but we can get something better long-term, I would be more in favor of that.
I just wanted to remind the board members and also the public, when we talk about a loan from the general fund, the village has very healthy fund balances in the general fund. We have a fund balance policy of 45%. So there are dollars there that we would want to make sure, though, the parking fund paid that back, but just so everyone understands that concept. And if you can go back, Eric, to our main summary slide. Thank you. Any other questions? All good conversation, feedback. Any other questions on the parking fund summary?
Okay.
What does it cost to borrow the money from the fund to go to that and then repay it? Nothing?
Nothing.
Yeah.
It's just
It's just
it's just a transfer of
Yep.
funds.
But obviously, the amount that we would borrow, depending on the scale of the project that we utilize in that option, will dictate the amount of time it takes us to pay it back to the general fund. So going all in and putting 1.6 million, obviously would, given our only $290,000 per year revenue, is probably not the best choice. So downtown improvements. So this will piggyback onto what our discussions were, and probably the same challenges in terms of cash flow and funding that we had in the commuter lot. I bring these up together because a lot of these projects could be done at the same time as our commuter parking fund work and our commuter parking lot work. Bidding them and constructing them together does generate some better unit costs in terms of mobilization and scales of economy. But they could be done separately, but that does have a cost impact as well. So the first project out there would be some downtown gateway improvements, which could be done in conjunction with some resurfacing work, which I'll get to in a moment with some other slides. So this would be adding in some new catenary lighting over the intersection of Spring Street at West Main Street. You might recall the streetscape project that we currently have designed and shovel-ready, just awaiting funding from a couple years ago, incorporated this catenary lighting, which are lighting on taller light poles with, we'll call them commercial grade party lights that string over the roadway. This would just be kind of the first section of that approach, just over the intersection, which then gives you the flexibility to add it later should the streetscape project get some outside funding and grants, or it could be standalone. I happened to visit Colorado somewhat recently and saw in Frisco they had the same exact approach where they only had the catenary lighting over their intersections. And it does still, even at that smaller scale, has quite the dramatic impact, highlights the areas with lighting at night for where pedestrians are crossing, and just gives it kind of a more higher end, unusual look for the downtown. This becomes a little more cost effective because we're also proposing some sidewalk work over at the intersection of Spring and Main, which I'll also go into in a moment. So resurfacing, before we get into the sidewalk, there are 3 streets in the downtown area, one of which, according to our pavement condition index rating, is in very poor condition, that being High Road. You can kind of see a little bit of the examples of the pavement. There's a lot of unraveling of the pavement, alligator cracking that's going to turn into significant potholes that require a lot of recurring maintenance. Spring Street, so the block just south of Main, and Jandis Road, in front of the local businesses next to our commuter lots. Those are in, I'd say, the bottom end of the fair to the high end of the poor condition. Those could honestly wait a year or two if we needed to. However, given that downtown paving is logistically a lot more challenging with the mobilization, the limited right-of-way, and then the nature of these one-way streets, on-street parking, there's a lot of phasing, kind of like the commuter parking lots. You just can't do a traditional rip it out during the day, come back a week or two later, do the paving and so forth. You have to do a lot of it in more compact timing, some temp striping because of all the parking that goes on. It really makes very little sense from a unit cost perspective to pave just High Road by itself. If you're going to do the downtown streets, we're going to want to hit all those 3 at one time. And that's also the same logic as to why we, at least we're getting bid numbers. We can reject them or phase them if we need to, depending on the funding approach we choose. But paving these roads at the same time as the commuter lots would also offer us the best chance at the best unit prices. Again, it comes down to timing, but it also comes down to cash flow and funding. So we're looking at the downtown street resurfacing at a cost of about $166,000. The West Main Street sidewalk improvements, we'll go back, which would be right in this area here. Go back to the previous slide. The dark gray is the existing sidewalk. Since we're proposing resurfacing Spring Street and Jandis Road, this is the perfect time to incorporate some additional sidewalk widening, which would give us some more pedestrian and downtown civic uses in that area. Gives us an opportunity for some street art or other decorative elements that kind of highlight the entrance to our downtown and the entrance to our village, but also takes care of some safety issues that are present there. Right now, the crosswalk between this block and the metro station and also our commuter lots is about 5 lanes wide. So it's a lot of pavement, a very long crosswalk. So we're proposing the widening of this sidewalk here to still have the 1 through lane going towards Route 14, so going eastbound on Main, and maintaining this 1.5 lane going westbound. So you substantially shorten that crosswalk for pedestrians. That, along with the proposed lighting that we had, concept that we discussed, makes this intersection a lot safer for pedestrians. And then we get a good 20 to 24 feet of extra sidewalk width, which could be used and programmed in a downtown atmosphere for a good number of different uses, whether it be tables for outdoor dining or more benches, art, signage, things like that. Just gives you a lot of space and a lot of flexibility. That is about, if bid with resurfacing work, whether it be the downtown parking or the downtown streets, that sidewalk improvement, which includes underground improvements as well with lighting conduit and utility relocations and drainage, storm sewer improvements, would be about $64,000. The lighting itself is about $90,000 or so. So all in, if you're to do that all at once, it's about $331,000, which for a resurfacing and sidewalk and minor streetscape project is a pretty manageable bite of the apple in terms of our master plan for downtown streetscaping. I believe our West Main Street corridor streetscaping project was about well over $1 million.
So the lighting itself is 91,000?
Yes.
That includes electric work, so underground work, the poles,
Yep.
everything.
And it replaces 2 existing streetlights that will need to be replaced down the road anyway. So the 4 poles there, 2 of the poles are in locations where existing lights exist. There's one over here and there's one over here.
In that, the estimate, the 91,000, that's option 1.
How much cheaper is it for option 2?
Oh, I'm sorry. Option 2 would be actually very close in price to option 1. You still have the same number of vertical light poles. The main difference is that there's less of the overhead wiring and lighting. I
So
believe our
minimal
consultant-
reduction.
But our consultant estimated about $3,000 to $5,000 difference.
But that's the high cost. 91,000 is the high.
Yeah, it's for
Okay.
option 1, correct.
And what does it cost just to replace the light poles? You said it had to be done down the
I'd have to
road.
double check on that, but I would estimate they're probably about 10 to 12,000 apiece.
You can see how these discussions, they're different, the parking fund and the downtown, but they're interconnected too. I mean, we want to pay attention to what we're doing in downtown and also in the parking fund because there's some economies of scale. Here, we bring forward these downtown items because our downtowns are our focal point. It's like any other city or village in the Chicagoland area or in the country. The downtown is your focal point. We need to continue to nurture the downtown. It is important for us to do that. So these are items that we want feedback on from the village board.
So if we go with something like this, I know, I don't remember how long ago, but we had talked about like we had talked about a couple different options. So is that replacing some of the options we have talked about in the past? Or I guess I'm just looking, again, long-term, if we invest the money into something like this, this is our entranceway,
Right.
right?
Well, this is part of the initial plan. This is like the first piece, and they can add on different things. When we had shown, we had that big open house at BMO Harris, and that's when we had the consultants do all the pictures and things. When we had the downtown businesses get their feedback, they did not want the big banner that says Downtown Cary, if you remember that. They wanted on I guess it would be the south, the opposite corners of, they wanted the monument signs. They just wanted that match, like the train station that just say Cary on them. That's what they wanted.
Yeah,
So
this would-
that's something that we could still do.
So
Yeah, exactly. This would be like a first phase of that.
Yeah.
It would be compatible with the future streetscape project that's designed and shovel-ready. It had to be adjusted slightly depending on which option we chose with the lighting. But yeah, it was meant to not have to be undone if we did find the means to do the full streetscape project.
And can we then see something, not at some point, if we go with option 1, how option 1 may be incorporated with other streetscape designs? So we get like the full picture of what eventually
Big picture.
we're trying to do again,
Sure.
long-term. I mean, I like it. It looks really nice. So but I'd like to see how this impacts us 2, 3, 4, 5 years if we're going to add on to it, what it's eventually the plan looks like.
Well, I think it's just to verbally kind of go over, I have those things up in my office, but to add, all the sidewalks would be redone, some pavers, having the street completely redone, West Main Street, adding nice-looking benches, like built-in benches with planters, that type of thing, going all the way up and down Main Street.
Yeah,
And this was
I
part
like all the visuals
Yeah.
to
So
see.
It's nice, a nice entrance to and these were all identified. The only thing that I think that's new is the art that says Cary. I think they're 5 foot tall aluminum or metal letters. But this would not impede with the continued new construction of going further west on West Main Street.
Right, but
This is just like the start of it all.
We're still looking for grants too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Yes, I was just
downtown,
gonna
for the
say.
streetscape. Yep, we're
The
still
ITIL
looking.
grant, we're going to reapply for that one.
as soon as the program becomes available and has a call, we will definitely reapply.
We are doing too our downtown TOD study that we got a grant for from the RTA, the Regional Transportation Authority. And once that's completed, it's probably about an 18-month process that will unlock other opportunities for potential grants, ways that we can improve the pedestrian facilities in the downtown. So we've got our eyes on that longer-term vision, and we're trying to pick off some small things that still connect with that long-term vision. But keep in mind, I want to stress, though, that I love the option one and what we're proposing here, but from a board perspective, it's what are our priorities? I mean, this is coming out of the Capital Projects Fund. Is this a priority for the village board?
I think it's a lot of money.
I think anytime you, it is, it's always going to be a lot of money to invest in. You want to look at what the return on the investment is. And I think from everything that you look at, the downtown is usually a good return on the investment. And it keeps things vibrant and it keeps things going. But I would agree that we need to look at the big picture, long-term plan to make sure that everything fits in with it. And we haven't looked at it for a while. So I think taking a look at everything, encompass all of it, I think gives us a better idea of where we're at with it
Where we're going.
and where we're going. Because that's what we have to look at it because we're going to live with it. It's long-term.
Yeah, I
But
don't
I
want to take it
think
out
it's
in a couple of
exciting.
years because we'd rather have a banner now or something.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yes.
I mean, and I don't know if anyone's done this, but I encourage, if you haven't, go down and check out Algonquin's, their downtown, what they've done. It is pretty cool to go down there and look at it. It really revitalizes it, makes it very vibrant. And I think that that's something we can bring. I don't know when, I don't know exactly how, but I think that that is something we should be looking at from a big picture standpoint of what we want to bring to our community that's going to really revitalize it and do really good for our town.
And in that streetscape mold, keeping in
Right.
mind, even if we decide not to do anything yet in terms of any of these aesthetic enhancements downtown, just to maintain the status quo, our sidewalks on West Main Street, our pavement on West Main Street, we're trying to not put a lot of money, to Trustee Cavelli's point, into doing a lot there in case one of these projects becomes a reality. But the sidewalk and the paving is going to have to be done just to put it back exactly the way it is, but just to not have the cracked pavement, the uneven sidewalks. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars for the sidewalks. We're talking several hundred thousands of dollars for the resurfacing. So it's, keeping in mind when I propose some of these ideas, there's scales of economy, and if you're going to do a future enhancement, when you're replacing the infrastructure, it's the time to do it. After we resurface the pavement, after we replace the sidewalk, obviously is not the best use of the dollars to do it, because we would be undoing stuff that you mentioned.
What about going to the people that wanted to donate to our signs?
Haven't heard from them in a while. So, they were notified that the process is to go through the Community Foundation in McHenry County. So for as far as I know, I've not had any contact with them about that. So
What about any of the downtown businesses? Would some of them want to have like their name, like on like even those posts, like to have their name on a post? I don't even know how that would look, but I know some places they'll do the brick pavers. If you make a donation, they'll put your name on a brick paver. I don't know.
Benches, right, benches, everything.
Benches, if
Right.
somebody wants to donate a bench, this was donated by, put a name in there.
well, these are really good conversations, and part of this is to get your minds thinking about what you'd like to see. It's Jake's and our hope that you'll come into Village Hall. We'll sit down and think about other things that you want to do. We can go over what the initial plans were. I don't know if Dale, you were familiar with any of those that we've done, just to kind of see what our
streetscape.
consultants, the consultants had kind of gave us an idea. But these are just we're trying to do something that's a little bit kind of fun projects that will really create the more excitement in our downtown district and give opportunity to show that we're reinvesting and it's something new. And it's I think one of the things about the art down there is it's a great place for people to go and take a picture and like the selfies and people, you see these on Facebook all the time where these people are, and it'll be a really kind of a cool opportunity to get people into our downtown get our businesses involved in it and maybe have some fun contests. And, actually, one of the things that we need to talk about, as long as we're talking about this now, is as a board, is we've been approached by a business that they want to put a mural on the side of their building. And as it stands right now, we don't permit that. And, if we want to do something and we have oversight and how that would be, because that's what they would really want to do, and have people come and take pictures of it so people are aware of this is and they want to go see where this all is. So, anytime that you can create new excitement in your downtown area to get people into town, it's a good thing. But, think about if you don't see something that you like, think about it. We can get staff to look at other options. But our hope is that you'll come in and sit down and talk about different things and what the realities are. Some of these things are expensive, but, you have to continue to reinvest. These are all things that are fluid right now, so nothing's done in stone. No final decision is going to be made today. But these are great conversation pieces to have with fellow board members, staff members, myself, and Jake as well. So.
And a lot of times it is, especially with streetscape work, it's hard to make an impactful statement with a project without spending upwards of $1 million, or in some of our neighboring communities, upwards of $20 million.
Yeah.
30.
Was it 30? Okay.
30 million, yeah.
That's my wallet.
Yeah.
Really good.
But
Would be
what we've
nice to
shown
have that
here,
kind of cash.
but I'm happy to say that what we've shown here for $300,000,
Right.
actually,
It's a big bang
streetscape
for
is
your
actually
buck.
about $160,000.
Notice.
A pretty decent impact for not 7 figures. So there's opportunities to do some big things with relatively small dollars.
Yeah.
But given the cash flow, no dollar is small. So
I think another reason that it's an optimum time to look at it is because we did just get a new train station. So you want to piggyback, there's excitement with that right now. And doing a little bit more just adds a little bit more to that. And so I think it's a good time to be looking at all this. I don't have answers at this point, absorbing it all, but boy, wouldn't it be nice to have all the money and we wouldn't have to worry about, we could do anything we wanted to. But,
Check the box, check the box.
it's needs versus wants, right?
Yeah, it's no different than any other community out there. I mean, we've got more
Right.
projects than what we can pay for.
Right.
Every community has that challenge. So that's why we do this discussion though with the village board.
okay, so I'll just wrap
That's
up
great.
on the downtown here. Mayor mentioned the signage, at least this concept is about $6,000 for some 5-foot tall metal lettering that could go somewhere in the downtown, but ideally positioned in this new widened sidewalk that we're proposing. Other little project for about $2,500. This would be another in-house project. I keep filling up all of Steve's time here for the summer, but we could extend underground some lighting and wiring so that the parkway trees that are in the parkway west of High Road in front of the businesses that extend to that western end of the downtown corridor could be decorated with the holiday lights in the same manner as the rest of downtown.
Can you orient us, please, Eric?
Sure. West Main Street, High Road leading into the community parking. This is the ale house and there's a doggy
Insurance.
daycare.
Thank you.
Insurance there.
Thank
The
you.
cutting room,
Mhm.
the cutting room, the hair
The
place.
cutting room, yeah. And that, by adding those lights too, we've had I'm glad to see this in here, but businesses ask, why does it stop at High Road when we consider downtown moving further? And we've talked about this before, really kind of increasing our footprint of our downtown. So that would help us increase our downtown footprint too.
And then this was just a summary of the projects that we had shown and listed. So ready to move to the next section? All right, so infrastructure and capital maintenance. This is, I believe this is Leaf Drive. I'm not sure this is Leaf over in the Brigadoon subdivision. So money, no object. This is at least some of the projects that have some needs for fiscal year 2021, kind of globally looking across all of the public works, capital, water, and sanitation funds. I see a lot of potential road work, resurfacing. A lot of those circles on the map are the SCADA improvements for the various lift stations, pressure reducing valves, boosters, and water towers, and so forth. Park improvements and other water projects that I'll go through in a moment. So our current state of our road network. About 2 years ago, we were sitting right about 70 for our pavement condition index. So that was pretty much on the very bottom end of satisfactory, which for network road average of a town our size is, or was phenomenal. But as you know, every year that goes by, pavements only get worse in condition, even through the best efforts of pavement management and preservation. So based on the latest survey and the models that we use to kind of forecast the condition without having to do more physical testing each and every year, we're estimating that the pavement condition index for the network is 65, about 65. So we're still in the high end of fair, which again is a very good state for our road network. Our strategic plan that was established several years ago did establish that a goal for us would be to keep our network average at 70 or better in the satisfactory condition. So we're close to it. We're not quite there, but given the current level of funding for roads and the availability and the costs for road maintenance, currently we're in a good state. However, as I mentioned, road conditions just get worse over time, and based on the pavement management report and then the analysis by staff and our consultants, we're estimating that it would take approximately $1 million per year of road resurfacing in order to keep our network average where it is currently at 65. If we were wanting to get to that strategic plan goal of 70 for PCI network average, we'd have to spend about $1.3 million per year. Now, our current motor fuel tax allocation with the extra 19-cent increase that went in place this past year or so, our share was only a portion of that 19 cents for that increase. But with that, we have about $763,000 per year in motor fuel tax revenue. So that, combined with the fact that we're likely going to be needing to pay for road salt with motor fuel tax money, it's an eligible expense. We had been paying for it historically in the general fund, but given some other needs, which we'll go into shortly, we're suggesting that we're likely going to need to start paying for salt with MFT money. So given salt costs and road costs, we're only able to pay about $1 million every other year. So that's our current kind of target program based on current revenue streams. So that blue line you see is the network pavement condition index with that 1 million every other year. So we're basically able to fund about half the amount required to keep the current condition status quo. So by 2029, so about 9 to 10 years from now, our network average with our current revenue streams will place our network average to the bottom end of fair. And then from that 10 years on, we'll go down approximately that same rate.
That's not good news.
And it's not unusual. Every agency is facing the same thing. The cost of asphalt, the cost of road maintenance will always, for almost everybody, far exceed the revenue for the MFT fund. Nationally and in the civil engineering circles, the current model with the Highway Trust Fund and the motor fuel tax process, that obviously it's a model that doesn't work the greatest. The fact that we had the MFT increase in the state of Illinois has helped, but obviously it stayed so flat for so long that the state and every local agency, not just Cary, is going to be playing catch up in that mold. So unless the basis for how those road revenue is changed, this is the model we have now that's the best we can forecast off of. So that's what we're at now in terms of road conditions. So with that funding level, so again, we're not at the 1 million per year, but with $1 million every other year, these are the streets, just tentatively, except for the next fiscal year, are kind of just a kind of a good first guess based on available funding that would be touched in the next 5 years. And then, as I mentioned, we're recommending that road salt be paid for with MFT funding. We're anticipating right now in our current fiscal year, we budgeted $170,000 for road salt. So I anticipate that the annual cost for road salt will increase. It does vary. You can see historically it's bounced around from between $113 a ton to as low as $60 per ton. So in the current market, I'm guessing it might be in the $70 to $80 range next year. So our costs will, each year for salt will likely go up It could go up 5 to 10%, or it could stay flat. So that being said, MFT-wise for next fiscal year, we have the closeout costs for the Three Oaks Road project, which luckily has come in under budget. So that actually is giving us a little bit of our fund balance, which is why our next year's road program, we're proposing about $1.4 million as opposed to our typical $1 million that would have been hit. But again, by virtue of the fact that Three Oaks came in a bit under budget and some of the contingencies that we had in place didn't need to be utilized. And really all we have out of MFT is road resurfacing and salt, and then local match for any various other MFT eligible road projects, one of which updating the traffic signals in Route 14 with illuminated street name signs, and then painting that equipment would be MFT eligible, which I'm suggesting could be accomplished even with our MFT road projects in FY 21-22. And then the other end of our road maintenance side, so not resurfacing, but the other areas of maintenance that we do on an ongoing basis. This includes sidewalk removal and replacement, sidewalk cutting, patching, pavement rejuvenation, which is that product that's applied to the surface of recently paved asphalt to extend the life of it. It maintains that flexibility so that they don't crack as early. So instead of a 15 to 20 year lifespan for the road, with the application and the dollars on that project early on, we can hopefully look to see maybe 20 to 25 years on that road. And then on-call civil engineering services for the occasional emergency project or unexpected need that requires those services. We do and have typically historically maintained 20 grand or so in the budget each year for those projects that come up. And luckily the ash trees have been long since removed, and the tree replacements for those has wrapped up for the most part. So our proposed tree replacement program dollars are reduced substantially. So the 10,000 there is really to replace the trees that come up that end up unhealthy, or in power lines that get removed, and then replacing some of those back. That all is currently in the capital fund. So again, that's another area where as that fund comes to a close without the revenue streams from Meyer Material or other, we do have to look to find other ways to continue to fund this, because this is an important part of our maintenance program.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when we talked about the downtown and those items that we want to do within the downtown, those projects are coming out of the capital projects fund. So are these projects. These are coming out of the capital projects fund. And so that's when I go back, and I can't stress it enough, but it's the priorities of what are the priorities of the village board. It's important to take a global look at everything within our capital projects fund.
And this is a continuation of some tree maintenance that we had last year. This actually happens to be currently funded out of our general fund, which is why we're taking such small bites of the apple at a time. But this is that half right of way that's sandwiched between rear yards along South Rawson Bridge Road. We've done about the first quarter of it so far, and there are continued to be other trees that are dying and falling in that corridor. I believe there's one that's we just recently identified that's probably now on the verge of doing the same thing as some of the others. So this is something that's still important to do, given that we still have responsibility for that right of way. Another project that we're just putting on the radar, but given our current other needs, we're not proposing that we hit it right away this coming fiscal year. But Route 14 at West Main Street, there is a recurring, it's a crash pattern that occurs at West Main Street and Route 14, particularly with cars as they go through that curve, not staying in the proper lane or mistakenly going straight towards downtown from the lanes that they should be turning right. It causes some safety concerns. So we have a proposal to do hopefully a grant application with IDOT to do some signage improvements to help more visually remind drivers where they're supposed to go in each specific lane. But there's a local share to that project that we would have to accommodate. Bristol Way pavement heaving. This is an ongoing matter that we've identified for quite some years where we believe we're able to, again, defer this for a year or two. I looked at it most recently as yesterday before the snow fell. The severity of that heaving, just because of the odd nature of the soils that exist there, does vary year to year. This year, it's actually not so bad as the photos you see there. A lot of that depends on how cold of a winter we get, how much moisture is in the ground, because it's the ice that pushes the pavement up. So currently, not so bad this year, so I do believe we can, as we settle and decide upon some other needs, I'm recommending that this one still be a strong need for us, but it can wait a year or two. Three Oaks Road, as you mentioned, we still have the closeout of that project. The paving is complete. The new bike path work is complete. There's just some, there might be a few more tree plantings to occur. Most of them did get done this last fall. And then the last big component is the installation of the overhead pedestrian beacon at Crest. So the lead time of these mast arms for these projects, not just ours, is insanely long, but we do anticipate that to be delivered and then installed in the spring. So here's a table summary of all those non-MFT road projects that we identified. Two I didn't mention that are from our past CIPs: West Main Street sidewalk extension. So that's over here by Village Hall. West Main Street between Carroll Algonquin and Briargate. There's no sidewalk currently on the south side of the road. We got a Safe Routes to School grant, which highly unusual, but this grant is covering 100% of the construction costs. So that one has, we pay for it, but then we get reimbursed on that federal grant. So that has a net zero cost to the village. And then another one that we just recently learned of the final award on is a DCEO grant for the Sidewalk Gap Program. So this is a bunch of small little sidewalks that happen to have holes in the network, mainly in the middle of town, east of Silver Lake Road, south of Three Oaks, and north of Route 14. So that is about $150,000 all in, and another 100% grant. So I don't want you guys to get too used to that, but
We're excited. We like it.
so we're happy to
Doing
have
that.
those.
I
no
like,
local
you're saving the
match.
best for last here.
Grant and reimbursement.
Jake's two favorite words.
Yeah.
Chief and I are very, very aware.
Yeah.
And then everything else is in the out years, as I mentioned. Signage improvements. We don't have any proposed currently for FY 2021, but there's still some out in the radar. Entry signs have been something we've talked about in the past, have designed, just currently awaiting funding. So I just have that in the out year or the future years. We do believe some wayfinding signage is warranted throughout town to get motorists to different destinations, particularly once the new police station and Village Hall are built. We have a critical and important facility that's in a new place that may not be readily obvious to everybody. So we do suggest that maybe some signage that would incorporate along 14 getting you to those facilities, since we're a bit off the beaten path, not on a major collector route. But at the same time, that same wayfinding signage could also point to other destinations like Keeper Park, get you around to even other areas north of 14, like Lions Park, the high school, and so forth.
Carrie Lake.
Mm-hmm. Carrie Lake, yes. So that's it's a suggestion for a future fiscal year, and the same illuminated traffic lights, street name signs I mentioned. Flooding mitigation. It's a shot of the since completed Sunset Crest. No flooding projects are proposed in our next 5-year CIP, with the exception of Spring Street Culvert Project. That's ongoing, should be hopefully completed this winter. If not, we're budgeting for it. Some other projects were completed, but again, these are all from the flooding study, future unfunded. Stormwater Master Plan, we suggest if we can find some resources to do a more or less a reserve study for our drainage system. So basically identify all of our assets in the stormwater management basins, storm sewers, things like that, which would then help us budget for improvements, not just flood projects for known problems, but also maintaining and paying for stuff that we currently have. And also could be the basis for user fee studies, or if that's something that the board would want to look at down the road as well. Speaking of Lake Carey, entry sign, there, we have budgeted, we're not going to be able to accomplish it this fiscal year, but we're anticipating for next fiscal year, the actual name and entry sign for the park at the Clausen Road parking lot. We identified a pretty reasonable cost for a stone slab monument sign. We would like your feedback, if you had any input. One, the concept of the stone slab sign, if that's something the board likes, and then two, what kind of base you would like to see on it. But there's two different options there that we depict. One with a more traditional manicured stone base that raises it up, kind of like what you would see on most commercial properties that would have the same kind of sign. I believe Three Oaks Recreation Area has something similar when that was put in. Or we could go with more of a more natural stacked stone look that would also raise the sign up, not as high, but raise it up above the grasses there, and again, give it a cohesive theme with the stone look. And given this is a former gravel quarry and rock quarry, it does have an appropriate message and theme to what we have at the park.
Any thoughts on
either one?
those options?
I love it. I like 2. I like option 2 because I think it's more natural, but I would be happy with any of them.
I like 2 too.
Can you reach out to Maringo? I think they did something with their town name, and I think they spent like $6,000 for something similar to this, but they did it. I don't know. Can you just, I guess,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we can look into
find out about
yeah.
that? Thanks.
That sounds like a
So
few
2 is
nods to
kind of the
2.
winner for now?
I like 1.
You like 1? Okay.
I like either, but I would pick 2 as just,
Do you have a choice?
3.
I'd
You don't
go
have to
with-
decide now either.
No.
go with 2 if I was going to go with it. 2. Is the Rotary Club gonna, I don't know if they're anticipating maybe helping with
Yeah,
something.
this was one that we're just taking on here. I know the
It's gonna be
Rotary's
the
looking
pavilion.
more at that. The initial discussions was a
Build the
pavilion option, so. But this is going to be a Village of Cary project.
This is the Land Conservancy Fund.
And then also out of that Land Conservancy Fund for next fiscal year, we're proposing to add a second floating dock to that little bay that's near the parking lot. And then what we would suggest is relocating the existing kayak launch that's attached to the other dock on the peninsula and put it down here. That way it's closer to the parking lot. The main reason it wasn't put there in the first place, twofold. One, there's a big growth of Phragmites, which is an invasive weedy, reedy plant. We treated it last year to kill the plant. So then this year we're going to have to do a burn. So that way the water is actually accessible down at that corner. It's a plant that tends to fill in and choke out the water. So once we get the Phragmites removed, and then we would also have to build a gravel path because it's a pretty significant grade difference from here down to the water. But given the fact that with the well tank construction, we're going to have a lot of earth that needs to be removed and moved off site, we're actually budgeting in that project to have that dirt, instead of taken off site and disposed of, taken here to Rotary Park, where, again, Steve and his crew, we're busy this summer, will in-house be able to grade out that path and get you down at a reasonable slope down to the water.
yeah, people will like that a lot better, not having to carry their kayaks so far.
I asked a question about the park real fast. So I was out there a couple months ago, and that gravel, some of it's really big and it's really deep, so it's hard, like even to push a stroller through there or anything. Will that go down over time as people use it more, or is that what we have?
The gravel trail does need occasional maintenance. So each year, that's one of the reasons in our O&M budget for the park, we do have gravel trail maintenance dollars. We will, sometimes the fines will migrate deeper into the base, leaving kind of the loose gravel. So what we would just then do is regrade the gravel, throw some more gravel, fresh gravel, and then mix it in and compact it to firm up that base. So the same thing, if any bigger boulders tend to loosen up, that would be just done as a maintenance matter that we would do in-house.
We do have estimates in here for paving
I mean,
certain
I'd be
sections of the
curious to
path.
see
too.
what something like that would be. It's kind of difficult to walk through, and a stroller, I would
rhythmic.
never do that again. And it was like a mountain bike kind of stroller, not like a
Yep.
whatever. But
Pram.
Yeah,
I don't know. they're technically called, but it was really difficult.
The other option is if it's not paved, you could actually put a top layer of crushed limestone, which is another more traditional material for gravel paths. That has its own maintenance requirements as well. That tends to wash out more. Some of our paths are pretty steep in the slopes. Granted, we have an excellent network of ditches that would help that, but paving is an option out there down the road for a
And I
cost
know it's
as
not a
well.
priority, but if that's within the 5-year or 10-year plan, what that might look like.
Yep. This is just, I don't want to address that in just one sec here. Trail equipment is another item that we suggest could be done at a relatively reasonable cost, about $20,000 for some exercise equipment along the trail, or more of a senior-focused fitness park, maybe near the parking lot. Long-term, a challenge course is not terribly expensive, but something unique that the other parks in the area don't offer, or a sensory or / inclusive playground. Way more expensive, but maybe some grant opportunities or partnerships for that as well. So as Jake mentioned, we have that as a kind of a future idea. Paving some of those trails could be an option down the road. It is the tune of several $100,000, but it could be done.
But that's something too, we could now, now in the future, now that we own it, we can start looking at grant opportunities for that
Yes.
whole
Yes.
area.
Yeah.
What is the
That's,
cost to keep it open all year versus closing it over the winter?
There'll be some other signage costs and warning and safety matters that we would have to implement. But again, the signage is, I wouldn't say it's a drastic cost. That's one of the reasons you see on this table here for signage. I have $20,000 program instead of our typical $2,000. So I'm guessing that would be about the differential because we're anticipating the likelihood that we would want to propose that, given the demand from the residents and I believe the feedback we've heard from the village board as well.
We are planning for it to be open year-round. So we got the property and we wanted to see how it operated and just take a breath before we just open the doors all year round. So we do anticipate that the ordinance would be brought back to the village board about those, I guess, a timeline of when it's open up year-round. And so Public Works is talking behind the scenes of additional signage and other things that we will need to add to have it be open year-round.
It's just nice because sometimes when it's mild out in December, which it has been, I mean, not right now.
Well, the Public Works opened it when it was warm.
I know, but I'm just saying in general, it was supposed to be closed and it'd be just nice to have it year round.
It's,
Agreed.
not always 60 degrees on Christmas Day.
Exactly,
But sometimes
exactly.
it is, and
We'll take it.
we
It
want
could
it to
be
be
April,
open.
we'll have snow, so who knows,
I'm
right?
sure it will.
Don't say that. Yeah.
One never knows.
And these aren't new numbers, but just keep everybody aware. Obviously, we have mowing costs, the gravel maintenance that we just talked about. We do allocate a decent chunk of dollars for doing that. And we're suggesting that we seal coat the parking lot, just again, expand and extend that life expectancy so we're not out there too often with that pavement. Probably some more trees would be in order, continue the fish stocking program, and then that fragmite control, that 2,000 is to do that burn to get rid of the stuff that we treated last year.
Now, what does Meyer have any, Meyer still has money allocated for the first couple of years for some things, correct?
It's a.
Wasn't there money set to the side that said if
It's a
there's
letter
any
of
maintenance
credit,
type of things?
It's-
Is any of that can be incorporated in, any of that covered by that?
For things that occur that,
The
That need
general
to-
wear and tear, doesn't cover that.
Well, I'm just thinking of things like
If
the,
there's big washouts,
well, or even the
Correct.
gravel, because that was still new, would that be something that, it really just got open, I didn't know if that's really wear or tear, if that's just something that is normal, I just
that would
was
be
curious.
normal.
Yeah.
I make it a parallel to if you have maintenance covered in your car,
Sure,
it doesn't include wiper blades or tires
But were
even.
they supposed to put that size rock down to begin with?
Yes.
Wasn't it supposed to be, it
Yeah.
was
Yeah, it's
supposed to be that
supposed to,
large? I thought it was supposed to be more.
No, compacted CA6 gradation, which is what they put, which obviously gives us a hard surface, not ideal for strollers and things like that. But in the event that we wanted to pave the paths, they don't have to redo the base. They'll more or less just have to do a smaller top coat, compact, and we can pave right over that. So it does actually bring the paving costs down for the future. But we use that material for that reason, and also we got a much bigger width of path than what we otherwise would have. And we also got all the ditch network and the drainage system. Water and sanitation, again, not new. We're finishing up the last year of our SCADA modernization over at the rest of the well facilities and lift stations. Well 10, that will be going to bid very shortly, and the construction will begin in 2020 and finish up in 2021. So this is the existing facility, and then here's the plan elevations for the new facility, which it doesn't look exactly like a house, but it has a lot more residential elements and nicer materials than definitely than the current facility, which looks like a
Shed.
dilapidated cabin.
See it every day.
Water main replacement. So our current rate study period included funds for some water main work. So right now we're in design and we'll be going to bid shortly for water main replacement in the Bright Oak subdivision. There's a lot of really oddly placed and very small, undersized 2-inch water main in that subdivision, which a lot of break history, and it's very challenging digs for us out there. So this will hopefully address and reduce the frequency of that issue. Meter replacement program is on the tail end. We have about 1,600 meters left to be replaced to the remote read units and the current standards. So we're targeting about 3 more years to get that done. I won't go through all of these, but these are just the projects that were from the previous CIP and the previous rate study. The highlights being the ones I just mentioned previously. A lot of well and water tower maintenance. Oops, I'll go back to one here. We are proposing an asphalt repair hot box trailer, which can be paid for out of the water fund. Currently, when we fill potholes and do any patching, we're kind of at the mercy of temperature. When we can get fresh asphalt and get it down quick, the improvements are more or less permanent, long-term improvements. When a water main break occurs or if a pothole repair is needed this time of year, whether it's late fall, winter, early spring, we're just putting cold patch in, which again doesn't last very long and requires repeat treatment. So this is the industry standard way to keep asphalt warm and workable and get us to be able to do more permanent repairs year round. So that's why we are suggesting that expenditure. I can't name too many public works agencies of our size that don't have one. So this is one of those long overdue tools for our team. Sanitation fund, the big projects there are the SCADA and the lift stations, and continuing to do a lot of our typical sewer televising and lining. One new one in here is the decommissioning of the CVS lift station. So once the Eastern Gateway lift station over the Selkie property is complete, there's the ability for us to deactivate the station that's next to CVS and have that property, the undeveloped property on that side of the road, drained by gravity to the new station. So this will then remove the old station and make the minor adjustments to the underground work to let the properties flow by gravity. And the most important slide,
Show me the
the
money.
bottom line.
This has kind of got everything on it. The very comprehensive slide here. If I give you homework here, it is to review this slide. You can see on the left, the far left-hand column, the funds. So we've talked about capital projects, vehicle equipment, MFT, water and sand, parking, building, land conservancy. We've covered all those funds today. If you move from left to right across the top, those various columns, so each fiscal year, so 2021 and so on all the way to 2024, and then the 5-year total. So we get to the 5-year total at the top. That gives for each one of those funds, the capital projects, vehicle equipment, so on, over those 5 years, what we would expect to see out of those funds from a cost perspective. Our funding right next to it on the right, that column, shows the available funding that we anticipate having over that 5-year period. And then finally, the final column is the funding source. So you can see some of the challenges that we have, and starting with the top, the capital projects, that is the one that I'm most concerned about, of not having a funding source. So we have over those 5 years, $3.7 million in costs that we anticipate, while there's an expectation of around $850,000 during that 5-year period of dollars. you talk about those projects of the downtown, the road work for the patching, for example, those are all coming out of capital projects. So we have to be very efficient with the taxpayer dollars here. The next one, too, that I want to hit on, vehicle and equipment. We're excited about the enterprise program. We think that's going to extend the life of those dollars, the $1.1 million that's sitting in there in fund balance. But there is no funding source beyond what we have currently projected of the 1.1 that's sitting in the fund. We need to have a funding source for the vehicle and equipment fund. And then finally, MFT. You saw, if you dial back a few slides, Director Morimoto went over what it takes to maintain where we're at right now. We need to come up with some additional dollars here to maintain our roads. But I would say priority number one is to have a funding source for a capital projects fund. On the bottom, then two, you saw on some of the slides, there was a future or unfunded projects. So we have $21 million of unfunded or future projects. So our 5-year, what we see from a total cost standpoint is $34 million approximately, with $18 million in funding. Keep in mind that does not include the debt issuance for the new building, so that one could consider that 18 million actually turns into 28 million. So like I mentioned before, this isn't unique. I mean, every community, city, village faces this, so they have more projects than they have dollars for. And that is exactly why we do this, and we want to give you the full picture so that the board is able to make informed decisions. Any immediate questions that the board has related to this slide?
I know you're used to me standing up here. And I know your feelings towards increasing taxes. But on the other hand, I want you to understand as well that I have stood in front of you for at least the last 4 years and told you something needed to be done. And I can promise you today, if nothing else, that after the end of next fiscal year, you will have $0 in the capital projects fund to cover those projects that I don't look at as pie in the sky projects. These are projects that you want today, that you would like to see completed. And I'm telling you that that will not happen. The Vehicle and Equipment Fund, the only reason we are able to extend out to 5 years is to take advantage of the leasing program that was available. That is the only reason. I can guarantee you in year 6 on that schedule, now that we are leasing all of those vehicles, that there will be an annual payment due of existing leases that will total probably $300,000 a year. If, in fact, we continued on the leasing program. It won't always be $300,000 because there are going to be some of the vehicles that we will keep longer than they're expecting us to keep them. But for each of those major pieces of snow equipment out there, which are in excess of $200,000, $1 million doesn't go very far. And can you imagine, just in trying to balance our existing general fund budget, if all of a sudden we had to cover even one of those vehicles on an annual basis? We just don't have the new revenue growth to be able to manage that. I mean, yes, you can consider and we can contemplate cutting. When you get to numbers like $200,000, we're not talking your average ongoing maintenance costs. So my point that I've tried to make earlier, and I truly understand your concerns, but my point is nothing is free here. If there are things that you want to handle, at some point in time you have to pay the price. And right now, we haven't taken those steps so that even if we implement something new, the time that it takes to start collecting the cash and having it available for all of these things that we want to use. I mean, truly, there is a lot of time and effort that goes into putting that program together to provide you with the information you need. At some point, all we need is the resources to make happen those things that you would like to see. That's all I'll say.
Any other questions related to this slide?
I just want to say, great job. I mean, everyone that put in the time and the effort for this. This is great information, I think, for all of us to process and get back and chat about.
So just in recapping, revenue sources, so available fund balance. We've got a couple that I just wanted to hit on. Capital projects fund, getting low. Land conservancy dollars, there's a significant amount in the land conservancy fund. And keep in mind that does have the ability to be moved to other projects or resources. Vehicle and equipment fund, $1.1 million balance in there. Recurring annual revenue, MFT, we touched on that earlier. Water and sanitation revenue, obviously we do, and we mentioned the 5-year water rate study that the village does here. And then commuter parking revenue, plus or minus. We're still seeing how that shakes out with the new structure that's put in place for paying for downtown parking. So revenue source options. This, I understand that it's not tasteful, it is distasteful to talk about these, but I just want to make sure and keep this in front of the board that you are aware there are options to consider. Non-home rule sales tax, stormwater user fee. Stormwater user fee would specifically be used for those stormwater items. Places for eating tax, natural gas utility tax. These are presented to the village board as options. And this, again, just in summary here of our 5-year plan, you know, the cost versus the funding. And we need to come up with recurring revenue sources at capital projects fund, vehicle and equipment, and roads. In that order. That's the priority. So very good. I appreciate everyone coming out, both our staff and the village board, to hear this feedback and to listen to us, go through all these projects that we have. There's a lot of great things that are going on here in the community. So again, please follow up with me, follow up with the mayor. Happy to continue this dialogue with the village board.
Thank you very much for putting all this together, and I'll just reiterate what Jake said. There's a lot to go over, and love an opportunity to sit down and talk with everybody, you know, one-on-one with Jake, and just kind of see where everybody is and what your thoughts are on these things. There's some, you know, decisions that we need to be making along the way, and if you come up with various ideas, we'd love to hear them. This is a team effort. We want to make sure that everybody is heard and have an understanding of where they see the village and where they want it to go. So these are, you know,
There's a lot.
there's a lot to consider. It's so, you know, I'm thankful for everybody for spending a Saturday morning with us and going through these things. But more importantly, I think that the village is on a real positive track. You know, the board is moving forward. The village seems to be prospering. We're getting a lot of new businesses, you know, coming in. So these are exciting times for us, and we just have to be cognizant of what we do moving forward. So without anybody have any other questions
Will
or
we have a
comments?
copy of this?
Yes, we'll send it out. And then also too, since we actually just wrapped it up
This morning?
yesterday, we'll put it on the website so residents are able to go on and access it too. So.
Right, any other comments? Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
There are no nays. We are adjourned. Thank you.